Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, we are very close to March 9th, which is the launch date of the multiplayer patch for Last Epoch. Now, we are not only getting a way to play with our friends, the game is changing a lot from our prior patch of 0.8.5. There have been a lot of skill changes, and a very large amount of those have come in as buffs, as well as the adaptive melee changes which have shooken up the game significantly. I have played a very large amount of the builds in this game, and that means that I'll get to talk about the builds that are being buffed this patch. So that's what this video will be. 5 of the biggest buffs coming our way in patch 0.9. If you end up enjoying the video or finding a build you like, make sure to leave a like on the video or subscribing to the channel, as that's the best way of making sure I make more videos like this one. Links for all these builds will be in the description, as I have played most of them or know someone else who has. One thing I want to note before the video starts though, is this is all based on the week of multiplayer we all played during the Crash the Server Party test. Now, we have reached out to the developers and they stated that there won't be any major changes in from what we saw there on those servers and what is going live for 0.9. So all of this video is still going to be valid once we get the 0.9 patch notes, but there is a very small minute chance that 1 or 2 details might be a little different, but no big deal, right? So for the first build we get to talk about is Surge Spellblade. This has multiple reasons why it's going to be much stronger in 0.9. While not being a direct buff, its direct competitor Flame Reeve has essentially been murdered with the removal of its synergy with Firebrand here. So it will probably become one of the best Spellblade builds out there until more changes come through. That's because of the melee adaptive changes. A quick description of that change is the fact that weapons are no longer going to have melee physical damage at a base, but will have adaptive damage much like spells. So if your skill has the lightning tag, this sword on the screen will deal 10 melee lightning damage instead of 10 physical. And of course, if you have the fire tag, it'll be 10 fire and any other tag, right? So this is huge for Spellblade, as most of their scaling is melee elemental based instead of physical. So this means when you equip some crystal swords, that melee flat on its implicit is no longer worthless, but very strong. This on top of Surge doing a lot of damage already, this means that we can go full degenerate mode and equip a Bastion of Honor instead of an Apocalypse Shield and become even tankier. Or you can be an absolute DPS demon and dual wield because your mama tell you that it ain't no time to be a bitch. You just want to dual wield swords, right? Whatever you end up doing, it will end up probably being about twice as strong as it is now, as you're getting a very large chunk of flat. So Surge Spellblade, super duper pug. Oshiran also got a huge buff, as it now gives 1% more damage against enemies per shock on them, which of course is even stronger than last patch. So this is just extra damage to push ourselves even further. Next build. So LICH has a history of being absolute bananas throughout Last Epoch history. And there was once a meme that it wouldn't be a solid patch without a nerf to LICH, and it was very consistent for about 2 years or so until they finally gave LICH a break. This has left the mastery in a very precarious spot, where it is very strong, but only when using the combination of Death Seal and LICH form. Which meant if you wanted to try any other setup on LICH that did not include these 2 skills, you were either memeing or you didn't understand what you were doing. That's why I was so confused when I saw the buff to Arcane Absorption. This has nullified about 2 years worth of nerfs to the mastery in one little change. You could easily scale this with cast speed and gain a very large amount of flat damage for your skills, and makes LICH a big dog again. I haven't played a Death Wave LICH specifically, but that's because Mau Mau has made such a wonderful version for me that I never really had to work on my own version. His is a little outdated, but I still recommend it because there hasn't been many changes other than the above change of the Ripped Blood getting buffed to the moon. I look forward to trying this build out when 0.9 finally comes. Next build. So this next build is admittedly my baby. I try not to attach myself to builds, and I am also not a fan of people trying to tag builds with ownership much, but I am pretty sure I was the first one to play Cold.WEREBEAR and popularize it when it came out. So it is held dear and near to my heart for the past year since it has been implemented into the game. So when I saw that it got buffed not only once, but twice, I nearly shit myself. But there is a catch. One of our best nodes, Gardens of Rage, was nerfed to only give us a fraction of the rage sustain it once gave us. This means that we'll be slightly unstable early on until we farm a Tears of the Forest, a new unique amulet introduced in 0.9. This is the replacement for Gardens of Rage, and it means we can dump Spriggan form as a skill specialization, which means we can spec into Swipe. This has a few benefits now. We now get access to the newly buffed aspect of the Panther, as long as we of course put on Tears of the Forest and unspec out of Spriggan form and spec into Swipe. And this gives us 35% more damage globally because we can get up to 7 stacks of aspect of the Panther, which is wonderful, right? This would have made me cream my pants already, but that's not all. Throne of Ambition was buffed to have, instead of 200% increased fire and cold damage and 200% increased armor, it now has 40% more fire, cold, and armor, which is great because we had an obsessive amount of increased damage thanks to our elemental damage over time affix on gear, which means this is a huge buff. We're also strength stacking thanks to Wise and Claws, which means we're getting a large amount of increased armor, which then of course is multiplicative with Throne of Ambition. So all of these changes mean that Cold.WEREBEAR is going to be insanely strong in 0.9. Next build. Well, this is another build that benefits heavily from the adaptive melee changes. This is going to be a double episode, as Fire and Void Warpath versions both benefit heavily from these changes. Now, when you convert Warpath to either of these damage sources, all of your flat on your weapons will benefit from all of your more damage sources like Arsenal of Flame. It also means that gigantic amounts of Void percentage damage will affect all of your damage for your Void version instead of just half of it. I bet it will probably lead to some nerfs in the future, specifically for the Void version, as there are some obscene weapons you can have access to in 0.9. Here's some examples. Shadow Cleaver is now 76 Void flat for Void Warpath setups, and a katana in your offhand, which is preferred in most situations, is another 38 melee Void damage. This is a gigantic change, as now all of your damage scales on Void, which means you no longer need physical resistance shred or you need to scale physical damage at all. You don't need to do that anymore. And of course for Fire Warpath, Eye of Rain is now best in slot. With some legendary potential, this is absolutely one of the better items in patch 0.9. All of its flat physical will now be flat fire with Fire Warpath, and I was easily getting 20 stacks of the buff when I was testing it during the Crash the Server party, so not only does it give us 83 flat fire damage at max without any LP, it also gives us 160% critical strike multiplier, which is a lot for one weapon. Next build. The last build we're going to talk about is a fun build that I got to play recently. Lethal Mirage was an absolutely amazing experience. Having Lethal Mirage chunk T4 Jurla while also having an okay clear experience was phenomenal with Fulgurite shards. Of course, this is another build that was heavily buffed thanks to the melee adaptive changes. That 43 melee physical on your daggers is now melee adaptive, which means that it will scale off of all of our lightning damage sources, which includes all the lightning pen and shred we get. This build didn't really need the extra damage, but with this change it might be like possible to dump damage almost everywhere and go for even more defenses, so it'll be tankier. But It was already in a strong spot, so I don't really know what we'll end up doing with it. Just have fun with more damage, I guess, like whatever. We of course also get to abuse Oshirons because we totally needed more damage, right? So it's fun to see a build like this get buffed to the absolute moon. Alright, there are a very large amount of changes coming in 0.9, and I plan on talking about a lot of it, so make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss it. There are just so many changes that I couldn't even list them in one video, so we're just gonna have to like keep talking about it, because like there's a lot of things that actually got buffed that I couldn't even fit in this video. I am very hyped for 0.9 and all of the builds I plan on playing. With all that being said, this has been Dread, off to go wait for 0.9. Bye!